Alright, welcome back to A320 Flight Sim. Glad to see you again. We're here for part 2 of our video where we're taking our Airbus A320 and getting it from that cold and dark all the way through a complete flight and landing. And so what we're doing right now is the part 2 of that video, which is from engine start all the way through getting up our plane to cruising altitude. So in the first video, we had our aircraft at cold and dark. It was completely unpowered. Went through all the procedures, getting it powered up, getting the flight computer programmed, and then we got the engine started, and now we're sitting at the gate. Now, ordinarily, you would do pushback and start simultaneously. You would do them both at the same time, but in order to have a nice, clean cut spot in this video, I chose to do the engine start while we're still sitting at the gate, and now we're going to go through the pushback procedure, and I'll show you what that looks like. So, first thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and connect ourselves to our tug, and that's, you can see it right there at the front of the plane there. We need to connect that bad boy up because that's what's going to push us back away from the gate. At this point we would have gotten taxi pushback and, excuse me, not taxi clearance, pushback and start clearance from air traffic control, and they would have given us a direction to push back to. In this case, they would have told us to push back and face north. So we're going to do that right now. So the way we do that, let's go ahead and jump in the plane, is we're going to go on over to our fly pad here. And we're going to select, again, our little truck. And this time we're going to go to pushback. So this is a little pushback tool that we use within the simulator, since we can't do like ground communications or anything like that. We're going to turn our pushback system on, and we're going to call for the tug. You can see there in the background the tug's moving over and connecting up to the front of our plane. And once that's fully connected, we can go ahead and begin our pushback. We're going to give it just a little bit of speed here. Go back to the front. And then I'm going to go ahead and release the parking brake. And you can see it starting to move backwards. So I'm going to go ahead and switch views here just to make it a little bit easier because, again, in the simulator, a little different. Normally the tug would take care of this, but we have to steer the tug in the game. So we just want to go ahead and get this thing pushed back. Like I said, this would usually be when you would be doing engine start, and you'd be going through all of those procedures of getting the engines fired up. But again, just to make a nice clean video, we went and did the engine start at the gate first. So let's give this just a second. We'll get her rolled all the way back, facing north, lined up, and ready to taxi. Alright, we are lined up and ready to go. So we're now ready to taxi. And at this point, what we need to do is go through just a couple little things. We need to first jump back in the cockpit here so you can see what we're doing. We need to go ahead and check our engine start mode. And since the engines are started, go down to our pedestal here. We need to go ahead and turn our engine selector mode back to norm since we're done starting engines. We need to go ahead and, excuse me. We need to go ahead and set our flaps. We're flaps 1 for this takeoff, so those flaps to 1. And we got armor and ground spoilers. Okay, since our engine is started, we can also go ahead and turn off the APU. And turn off the bleed air. We're not going to need one of those anymore now that we have the engine started. Alright, we can go ahead and start our after start checklist at this point. You can see anti-ice, we don't need that. We're in nice sunny Phoenix, Arizona right now. Getting ready to take off from Sky Harbor International. And we're going to fly to Seattle today. Not going to fly on this video. We're going to at least get up to the cruise altitude, and we'll finish that on the next video into Seattle. ECAM status looks good. Our pitch trim and our rudder trim are both looking just fine there at neutral. So at this point we're ready to taxi. That means that we need to call air traffic control and get taxi clearance. So that's what we do right now. We would call air traffic control. We would ask for clearance to the active runway. And again, we'll just go ahead and pretend that they've done that at this point. And so the next thing we need to do is go ahead and check our flight controls before we get rolling. So we're going to look down at our ECAM. And you can see I'm going to select this one that says flight controls. And you can see our flight controls here on the screen. And what we want to do is we want to test all of these things. So we're going to go ahead and test our ailerons. You can see them moving. We want them to go, we want those green arrows all the way up into the white boxes. Go ahead and test our elevators again. With those green arrows going all the way up into the white boxes. And then finally we're going to test our rudders. And again, all the way over to each side. So our flight controls look fine. We have good control and we are ready to go. So we need to go ahead and turn on our taxi lights since we're going to be rolling down. Even though it's the daytime, we still want to have those on. Taxi lights are right here. And you can see there's two different switches. We have taxi lights, nose lights, to taxi, and we have the runway turn-off lights on. Those are the two lights that are there on the front wheel that we use for taxiing. And they light everything up real great for us during the evening, but right now we still have them on even during the day. Next thing we're going to do is go ahead and chime our cabin. I'll call and let our flight attendants know that we are going to be moving. Alright, so we're ready to go. The last thing we need to do is go ahead and disconnect from that tug. So we'll move back over to our fly pad, disconnect from the tug. We need to wait until this orange one that says nose wheel steering disconnect goes away. Because then, in the simulator, what they're simulating right now is them disconnecting the pins from that nose wheel where the tow bar goes to. Alright, that's cleared off our ECAM, which means we are cleared to taxi. I'll release my brakes. You'll notice that the plane's going to kind of just start rolling on its own. Excuse the little car there. I'm not actually even getting any thrust, and it's going to roll on its own. It doesn't take much to get them moving. Alright, we're going to be taking off from runway 25 right. That's on the other side of the airfield. We just need to cross over a bridge here. We've got a little bit of traffic in front of us. In the meantime, while we're taxiing, a couple things we can do is we can go ahead and go back down to our pedestal. And we need to turn our weather radar on and our transponder on. Make this big turn here at Phoenix. There are some traffic in front of us. Let's wait for a second. He's waiting for that other guy to pull out. Here at Phoenix, we've got the terminals right down the middle, and then there's also a road right down the middle too. So you have to cross bridges to get from one side of the airport to the other. So we've got to get from the north side over to the south side of the airport here. So we're going to wait for this American Eagle to taxi out in front of us. We'll pause here for a minute, just take care of a couple other little things. We went ahead and turned on that weather radar. We went ahead and turned on our transponder. The next thing we can do is go ahead and set our initial altitude. We know that we said our initial altitude would be to 5,000 feet. So we're going to go over here, go ahead and set that initial altitude to 5,000 feet, have that ready to go. And then the other thing we can do is we can go ahead and turn our auto brakes here on to max. We want those to max in case we have to abort the takeoff. When you look down at our ECAM now here, you see we only have one more thing to do before we can take off, and that's our takeoff configure test, and we don't do that until we get to that hold short point. Alright, looks like we're going to move here a little bit. We'll be back with you in just a couple minutes when we're at that hold short point and traffic's cleared and we're ready to take off. Alrighty, we are at our hold short point, waiting for runway 25 right. All our traffic is cleared out of the way. We've got a little bit of time here to show you a few more things. So what do we need to do at this point? We need to go ahead and check our flaps. Just ensure they're in flap position 1. They are. Our TCAS is on. Yep. And we'll go ahead and chime that cabin again, let them know we're getting ready to take off. And we can perform that takeoff configuration test that I was telling you about just a minute ago. So we come up here, we hit takeoff config, and you'll see on our ECAM now that it is showing normal, so that's great. So we can now go to our before takeoff checklist, and we're doing the above the line. So we have which is that taxi one that's above the line, right? So flight controls we checked, we did that. Flap setting both, they're good. Radar predictive wind shear is on. Our engine mode is off. Our ECAM level is no blue. We're all good. Everything's green. Cabin is ready to go. Alright, so we are good to taxi out onto the active runway at this point. A couple things I want to point out before I do that, though, just so you know, because there's a lot that's going to happen as we roll on out for takeoff. Normally, I keep this view when I'm taking off, kind of gives me a nice realistic thing. I'm going to pull this back today so that you can see the instruments a little bit. One of the things you're going to notice as we start rolling is this speed tape here is going to start rolling up and getting faster. You can see a couple numbers on there already. The 144 in blue is our V1 speed. Our 148 is going to be that rotation speed. So that's you're going to see those numbers approach. You're going to see the little blue and then the purple triangle that tells us it's time for us to go ahead and rotate back. And then as we rotate up, as soon as we get a positive climb rate, we're aiming for 15 degrees over about 5 seconds. So a fairly easy climb up. Once we have that positive climb, gear is going to come up, and then we're going to start climbing out on our departure. I should be able to have a little more time to explain things at that point. You're going to see the altitude rising, our speed going up a little bit, and then eventually we're going to level out. We're going to reduce our flaps. We're going to reduce our speed to lever climb. There's a lot of things going to go on at that point, and then we'll go from there. But I wanted to talk about that first because as we're rolling down the runway, when it comes time to take off, it actually goes really, really fast. And so I may not have time to explain everything, but we'll give it a try. So let's go ahead, release our parking brake. Let's roll out onto the active. We would have permission at this point from air traffic control. We would let them know we were for departure, and they would have given us clearance to come out onto the active runway. C25 right, and we want to get along that center line. Give us a quick stop. Right now that we're out here, we want to go ahead and turn on our landing lights. Those two switches right there. You also noticed that it moved the nose switch to takeoff, so it changed to one of those lights there on our nose as well. Okay. We now go to our below the line takeoff checklist. Below the line, and you're going to see here, are we on the correct takeoff runway? We are. We're on 25 right. TCAS is on. Our packs you don't need to worry about. We're good to go with them. So we are ready to go. We can take off. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring our engines, back this off a little bit again, kind of show these over. We're going to bring our engines up to about 50%. See the blue dot? Set my brakes. Okay, we're at 50% and they're stable. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and release my brakes. I'm going to thrust up. And we're rolling. You see that speed going up, that yellow arrow is just telling us that our speed is increasing. 80 knots. 100 knots. 120 knots. V1, let it go. Rotate. Positive climb, gear up. You can see that green in the middle. We're trying to keep on those lines, right? That's following our flight path. Normally we'd be getting some direction from air traffic control right now, from our switching over to departure frequency, that kind of thing. Okay, go ahead and make sure our auto thrust is on. You see it going to lever climb. I'm going to go back. That means I'm moving my levers back to climb. And now I'm on auto thrust, so the plane is completely controlling our speed at this point. We're not touching anything when it comes to speed. Pitch it up a little bit, pitch down just a little bit. Now we want to pick up a little bit of speed. And you can see that S on the speed tape. That S is the point where we need to retract our flaps. So I'm waiting to get to that speed to come out of that flaps one. I'm still hand steering the aircraft right now. could go to autopilot, but I'm going to hand fly for just a minute here. I kind of like to hand fly until I get to that flaps. Getting ready to make a big turn here in just a second too. Alright, track those flaps. Go ahead and turn autopilot on. And now I am not in any control of the airplane at this point. Well, from the standpoint of it's being steered, right? Speed, heading, the altitude is all being controlled by the aircraft. We're now at 5,000 feet. I'm going to go ahead and turn my taxi lights off. All right, good so far. Back out the window, you can see we're getting ready to make this turn. If you look down at our, reduce that a little bit. We're approaching that turn with 2 nautical miles. We're going to get a big right-hand turn here in just a second. Here it comes. All right, and we need to start climbing. I'm going to go ahead and climb this up to 19,000 feet, which would be the normal kind of departure. Once you get clear of the departure, then you generally would go up to whatever your cruise altitude is. So you can see over here on our engines, it's giving us more thrust because we're trying to climb. You can see over here the altitude is slowly starting to go up. You can hear those engines spooling up. And right now, the next thing I'm really waiting for is 10,000 feet. We're going to do a few things at 10,000 feet. So far, so good. Flying over beautiful Phoenix, Arizona. My hometown, it's where I was born. Grew up here. Actually, not the right side of the aircraft here is pretty close to where I was raised. So. Alright, we're approaching that 10,000 feet mark. Which is a little significant mark because they're going to do a couple things here. First thing we're going to do is go ahead and disarm our ground spoilers. Don't need those. I'm going to go ahead and turn off our landing lights. 10,000 feet. Landing lights can come off. Okay. Next thing we can do is we can go ahead and turn off those seatbelt sign and the electronic devices sign. People go ahead and get out their laptops and get out their iPads or whatnot. Let them have a little bit of entertainment. Lastly, the thing we need to do is, if it was still on, we would want to make sure that our auto brake here is off. It is off. If it's not, we'd go ahead and reset it, but it is off. And it should be. It normally resets itself, but I want to double check it. All right. Next big mark is 18,000 feet. Here in the United States and Canada, 18,000 feet is what's called the transition level. So, when we set our barometer originally, we had it at that certain point. Right now it's at 30.04, which is the barometer that was on the ground there in Phoenix. Now, that barometer, I think I explained before, can change depending on the air pressure, depending on weather, depending on, well, it is the air pressure, excuse me, but depending on the weather, depending on altitude, all those kinds of things. And it's the standard pressure that is what we're concerned about, because when you get to 18,000 feet, and like I said, in the United States and Canada, at that point, everybody resets their barometer to what's called standard, which is 29.92, or just STD on the display here, which I'll show you in a second. And the reason for that is because there's such a variance in what the actual air pressure is as you're flying over these hundreds and thousands of miles. You've got different elevations, you're flying over big mountains, you're flying over weather systems that affect the barometric pressure, and if everybody is not set at the same pressure, which is what tells you what your altitude is, planes would be running into each other left and right because there would be no way to maintain that separation. So what we do is, at 18,000 feet, we set all our barometers to the exact same number, so everybody is flying at the same reference point. That allows us to keep that vertical separation of at least 1,000 feet between the aircraft, and then they also, if you're flying the same direction, if you're going east to west, they're at one. If they're going north to south, they're another. And so that's what helps everybody stay away from each other. And we do that at 18,000 again. Now, different countries use different numbers. It'll be in the charts. When you're flying in other countries, it'll tell you what the transitional level is. Also, when you do that ATIS that I was talking about, when we were looking and we were getting the weather and the conditions at the airfields, part of that will also tell you what the transition level is if it's not the standard transition level. And like I said, in other countries, that'll be in that information so that you know when you're supposed to set your barometer. And that's inputted into your flight computer, because now what you'll notice is we just passed 18,000 feet here, and you see that my barometer down here on my screen is flashing at me. It's telling me you need to change to standard. So I'm going to go over here to my setting. I'm going to pull on that knob, and now you can see it says STD for standard, and now I'm at that standard barometer. If I was to move it around a little bit, you'd see, if I was to unselect it, it's at 29.92 is what standard is. So now we're at 18, we're approaching 19,000 feet. At this point, I'll be getting clearance from air traffic control to go ahead and continue my climb up to cruise. My cruising altitude today was flight level 380. So there's the other difference. Once you get above that standard barometer of 18,000, you no longer call your altitudes out in feet, because it's technically not accurate what your actual altitude is above ground level, because of all the variations in the ground and the pressure like we were just talking about. So above that, once you switch to standard, we refer to it as a flight level. And you take off the last two zeros. So for instance, I'm going to, you can see here on my screen, flight level 380. And on my altimeter, you see that shows us 38,000, right? But we refer to it as flight level 380. So whenever I talk to air traffic control, I will tell them my flight level at this point. So if I was talking to air traffic control right now, I would tell them I'm at flight level 190. You can see here on my on my PFD. So now you can see we're now increasing our altitude. We're going ahead and getting up to our cruise altitude of flight level 380, or somewhere around 38,000 feet. All right, I'm going to take a break, because when we get to 38,000 feet, we're going to do a couple things, a couple of very small things, actually. We've done almost everything we need to do in order to get this aircraft going. So at this point, the only thing left to do is actually physically get up to 38,000 feet, or flight level 380, and then we really don't need to do anything else besides monitor. Everything that we have switched is switched to where it needs to be, and at that point what we're doing is we are monitoring air traffic control. We're switching between different air traffic control stations as we fly across the country, and we're kind of looking ahead. We can relax a little bit because this is a little bit of a longer flight. We've got about 2 hours to get to Seattle. When I get about 300 miles outside of Seattle is when I really need to start doing the planning for my descent. Now, we would do that along the way. We're going to plan for some contingencies and everything, but for the last video in this series, we are going to start that planning and show you once we get about 300 miles outside of Seattle. Right now, we are 928 miles outside of Seattle, so we've got a couple hours to fly. We're going to not show all that because it would just be a flight. And so we'll go ahead and stop this video here in just a second and say thank you again for your support. Appreciate that. If you can like and subscribe, we really appreciate that as well. And then we'll go ahead and get the third video up pretty soon here, and that's going to show the descent planning, right? What we need to do once we get that about 300 miles outside, the descent planning we need to do, a few little programming we need to put into our flight computer. One of the things we're going to really need to be aware of, because we're going to find out from air traffic control, is did our runway change and did our approach change? Because quite often, as you fly across country for several hours like this, the weather in your arriving airport can change, the winds can change, and you might need to land at on a different runway. When that happens, there's a few steps you need to take. If everything stays the same that's in your flight plan, if fantastic. You don't need to change anything. But if any of those, if that runway's gotten changed or your approach procedure's gotten changed, we're going to need to change some things within our flight computer and match so that the aircraft does what it's supposed to do. We also then will do the actual descent along the star. We've chosen an ILS approach, which is an instrument landing approach, which means the plane is pretty much going to fly us in, and then somewhere around 500-600 feet, I'm going to take manual control of the plane and bring that sucker in for what is hopefully a nice smooth landing into Seattle Tacoma, into SeaTac Airport there in beautiful sunny Seattle. Hopefully it's sunny because it's the simulator and I say it's going to be sunny today. Here in Seattle, actually today it's pretty cold and foggy, but you know what, let's make it sunny just for fun. Alright, so we hope to see you back for that next video on the descent and landing into Seattle. And again, thanks so much for watching. Again, like and subscribe. Hope you enjoyed this video on how to get the A320 backed up away from the gate, taxiing out, and up to cruise altitude. Alright, have a great evening, and thanks again for watching A320 Flight Sim.